for Matthew Stafford, but I think it was just sort of a weird game. I wouldn't read too much into it long term. I think
the hard part is just that you're not frequently starting Matthew Stafford.
Correct.
You're picking these spots, and when he fails you in one of those spots, from a fantasy perspective, hard to go back to the well later.
Yes, it is frustrating and disappointing.
Can I tell you that I am just not as in on Marvin Jones as I had hoped that I would be at this point, because even this game, when we thought without Kenny Golladay, we thought he was going to have a lot of action.
Scored.
It was he did score, yes, but it was Danny Amendola and it was T.J. Hawkinson that I feel like have continued to be more of the guys than Marvin Jones is. He just looks out of sync and not like the guy that we saw be a top 20 wide receiver last year.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, for this particular game, the middle of the field is obviously where they were comfortable, where they thought they had the mismatch. And, I mean, that's, Hawkinson and Amendola. So.
And that is where the Vikings had the mismatch up the middle with Dalvin Cook every single time.
Putting this out there right now. Really, really, really bad week on the waiver wire this week, but Danny Amendola will make the list. Stephania Kyle Allen left the game yesterday.
Pretty much think that was redundant. I'm just saying. I think those two phrases. I think you only needed one of those two sentences. I think they both said the same thing.
Stefania, we did see Kyle Allen leave the game yesterday for Washington. It looked bad the minute it happened.
It did. It was a strange injury. Jabril Peppers was going after Kyle Allen and just caught his leg in like a whip, and it forced his leg into this quick external rotation. Usually when you see these are rotational injuries. And if you think about a quarterback for Washington who suffered a severe rotational lower leg injury recently, it's just very eerie that it happens again on FedEx Field. This does not appear to be as severe. There's no report of it being an open injury, and it sounds like Kyle Allen is headed for surgery, but this will likely end his season. And obviously Alex Smith came out and took his place, and Alex Smith has already been named the starter for next week. I will tell you this, one of the first people over to check on Kyle Allen was Alex Smith, and you have to imagine for him in that moment, seeing Kyle Allen go down with a lower leg injury, it was just very emotional for him, and he talked about that afterward. Sure. It'll be interesting to see what Alex Smith can do with actually a week of practice with the first team, something he has not had yet.
And so we know it'll be week 9 for Alex Smith, and I would think, and this is just instincts here, that it's probably going to be Alex Smith going forward. I don't know this for a fact, but I think Dwayne Haskins is basically a lost cause in Washington.
I would agree with that.
So it's Detroit this upcoming week. By the way.
I mean, Haskins will be the backup to Alex Smith, but you think about this franchise for a second. You think about Joe Theismann, you think about Alex Smith, and now you think about Kyle Allen. And it doesn't sound like Kyle Allen's injury is as serious as what happened to Theismann or Alex Smith, but still, it's just, how snake bit can one franchise be? Yeah, I've always liked Kyle Allen. Sure. He's a Texas kid. He played at Texas A&M, where I grew up, and obviously where my father still teaches. And so I've always liked Kyle Allen as a quarterback and as a person. And so wishing him the best. I will say that Alex Smith suddenly becomes an interesting streamer. To Stefania's point, he hasn't had a ton of time with the ones, right? He came into the year as the third-string quarterback, so getting a full year, and look at his upcoming schedule here. Yeah. Lions, Bengals, Cowboys are the next 3. I do think Alex Smith, listen, it's not always going to be pretty. It's going to be a lot of dink and dunk, but I do think he's a viable QB2 streamer.
I think one thing, and I don't want to derail the conversation too much, but we're learning this more and more, especially in fantasy, the value of a quarterback who can actually pile up points with his legs makes it really tough to make an Alex Smith type streaming call, because obviously he's been through a lot. Not like he's going to be the most fleet of foot player out there. So you're right.
He might be. But I mean, he ain't going to be Kyler Murray or Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen or somebody like that. But this is a guy that prior to the injury was actually a very mobile quarterback.
But this was gruesome of an injury as you could possibly have to your leg. That's my point. My point is, we'll talk about it later on in the week when we discuss quarterback streaming options, because Patrick Mahomes, amongst other quarterbacks, will be on their bye in week 10. One more injury before we get to, potentially.
I'm just gonna say this. Don't dog Alex Smith when you're sitting here putting Danny Amendola on your waiver wire column. If we're down in the Danny Amendola range, we're allowed to talk Alex Smith. That's all I'm gonna say.
Fair enough.
Fair enough, Secret Squirrel. Can you make a ruling there?
That's fair enough.
Right?
I will allow that. In a quarterback, I don't know when you're going to start him, at least, but he's at least
it's a deeper league. It's a two-quarterback league. It's a super flex option, that kind of thing. Yeah, listen, he's not a 10-team, one-quarterback league option. I get it.
Okay. Fair enough.
I get it. But listen, if we're in the Danny Amendola range. By the way, in baseball, there's this thing called the Mendoza line.
Yes, I'm aware of it.
Yeah. I'm sure for people that aren't huge, there's a thing called Mendoza line. Mario Mendoza was an old time hitter that averaged, I want to say, 213 for his career. And so there was I forget the baseball player that came up with the quote. It might have been George Brett. But basically said he always looked for the Mendoza line, like because they always would print the batting averages in the newspaper,
right?
And so he would just and that was sort of the cutoff. Like, if anyone had a batting average basically below Mario Mendoza, they would never, they wouldn't make the newspaper. So I think it was George Brett. I could be dead wrong about that. I'm sure Thirsty Kyle will correct me. But anyway, it was always just I look for the Mendoza line.
Yeah.
So I think we should have an Amendola line. You know what I mean? Like for waivers. Right? Just because Danny Amendola's been on waivers, in the waiver column.
Yes.
He's like the new Mohamed Sanu.
Frequent appearance.
Right.
Him and Corey Davis, they just live on the waiver.
Right.
Live there.
But for years, Mohamed Sanu was that guy.
Oh my God.
It was always just sort of borderline. You know what I mean?
My phone auto corrects. I type in the M and it's Mohamed Sanu. I've typed it so many times. Stefania.
Anyway,
not quite there yet with Preston Williams, who has been on the waiver wire column a decent amount, but he won't be this week as he's now banged up.
No, and it's unfortunate because I really thought that he had a chance to have a strong second half of the season, obviously coming off the ACL reconstruction from last year, and he started out looking like he was going to have a really big game. Apparently he and Tua have a great relationship, but then carted off in the second quarter with a foot injury. No fractures reported initially, but as we have seen, these foot injuries can be nuanced, and you can discover a lot in the further testing, and it certainly didn't look good when it happened.
All right, so the Dolphins, by the way, traded Isaiah Ford this past week to the Patriots. Not that he was a game changer for them, but he probably would have been the wide receiver we'd be talking about today if we were to suggest another wide receiver besides Devontae Parker. I think Jakeem Grant, if you're going to maybe look towards a Dolphins wide receiver. But the way that they're winning right now is defense.
Right.
They're spreading it all over the field.
They are.
Third string tight ends are getting action right now.
Yeah, you're seeing Adam Shaheen and what's the first name of the guy? Smythe. Andrew Smythe?
I think it's Andrew Smythe. Patrick Smythe works for the Broncos.
Patrick Smythe works for the Broncos. That's right.
He does an excellent job.
I knew I had a Patrick Smythe. I have a Patrick Smythe in my phone.
He's awesome. Right. Shout out Patrick Smythe.
Absolutely. Shout out to Patrick Smythe. Does a great job for Denver, has for years. But yeah, I mean, it is all over the place. And remember, Devontae Parker was shadowed by Patrick Peterson yesterday. You expect they're going to move him around. Maybe Mike Gesicki starts getting more involved here. It's been a tough row there for him a little bit. I would agree with you. Real quickly, Isaiah Ford's a nice little player. I actually think he has some deep league value once he gets integrated into the Patriots.
Yeah, I mean, I don't.
They
think
got no one there.
Oh. I'm aware. They called me last week to play wide receiver, so I respectfully declined. Maybe we'll see. I mean, he probably should be eligible for them starting next week when they play the Ravens. So keep an eye on Isaiah.
I'm just saying you can mark this down. I think Isaiah Ford's a nice little player, and I do think there's a potential for some value in New England given the dearth of other options they have.
So I had a tweet yesterday before the 4 p.m. games actually were played, and I wanted to get it out before the 4 p.m. games were played because I figured Christian McCaffrey would slide down the list after this. I said, hey, Christian McCaffrey has played in just 3 of 9 games this year. He's still RB25 on the season. He's missed 6 games, RB25.
Right, yeah.
Well, after the 4 o'clock and the 8 o'clock games, he moved all the way down to RB26 for the season. Think about that. Think about that.
Right.
This Christian McCaffrey has missed 6 games, and he's RB26 on the season. A marvelous
total
performance.
Points.
In total points.
In total points.
It's just a ridiculous performance yesterday. 37.1 fantasy points. Basically a full-time player. And I don't want to not talk about the brilliance of Christian McCaffrey because we could do the entire show on that, Stefania. But I also don't want to be the bearer of bad news. I'm afraid I might have to be, as late in the game, Christian McCaffrey did get banged up.
If you were watching the game, as I was, you saw it and you're like, no, he's been out so long. But he clearly was uncomfortable, was reaching up in the collarbone area, up under his shoulder pads. They looked at it. He went back in the game. I think he got them a first down, a critical first down late, but he had to extend his arm to do it. And then he came off and he was clearly uncomfortable. They appeared to be evaluating shoulder, collarbone, rib area. There are some reports out there floating around right now. We're waiting for confirmation on our end, but apparently this could potentially cost him more time. We wait and see.
Which is awful.
I'm done. I don't want to do the rest of the show anymore.
It's awful. It's interesting. There were some reports out there elsewhere prior to the game that there was going to be a split, in essence, between Christian McCaffrey and Mike Davis. 18-1 was the carry difference between McCaffrey got 18 carries, Mike Davis got 1. A little closer in receptions, 10-5.
Do they split the pregame meal?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know where the report on splitting came from, but it ended up being incorrect, that report. But we did say, I will say this, we did say last week, we talked about this on the show all week, if you have Mike Davis, do not get rid of Mike Davis. What is his rostership percentage?
I'm proud of the people because...
Did they listen to us?
Sort of.
Okay.
71.3%.
Okay.
I thought it would be like 37. I really did.
Sure.
I thought that it would just, I was like, oh, I have my lead for the waiver wire column because, as I mentioned, it's pretty slim pickings this week. Now, Mike Davis is available in about 30% of leagues. Take a look. Take a look. As we know, it's not like it's a mystery as to who will be the guy if Christian McCaffrey can't play next week, and they play against the Buccaneers, who the last time these two teams played was the first time that Christian McCaffrey got hurt, and Mike Davis in that game ended up with 7 catches. So, once again, plan for Mike Davis potentially having to start this week. But Christian McCaffrey, it was so good to have you back, even if
really,
short-lived.
Really was. We'll keep our fingers crossed on that. And you see maybe a little bit more Curtis Samuel, who, by the way, another good game, third straight game. Curtis Samuel having a big fantasy day.
I'll make the waiver wire column as well. I have an announcement to make, and I think it's important. The Saints social media team, and I want everybody to hear this loud and clear, is one of the top 2 in the NFL, and an 8-2. Let me just put that out there, because after last night's Alabama playing directional state-type beatdown over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Saints went wild into the wee hours of the night on Twitter. It was hilarious. Go check their content. Bravo to you, Saints social media team. If you're not following the Saints, I don't care if you don't like them. They're fun. Just go follow them. And Michael Thomas returned last night.
Can I do that now?
Yeah, worth your time.
Sure.
Michael Thomas returned last night, 5 catches for 51 yards. He had 6 targets, so not much, but he had 17 receiving yards going into the game. Stefania, I just would be curious, in watching him last night, did you sense any sort of limitations for a guy that's missed, 7 straight games? Of course, one of those was, due to team punishment, but still, he's been banged up.
No, I really didn't. I didn't see anything. We didn't see things that you might have been looking for, a really big, deep play where he had to make a move or get particularly physical. But I think they were just spreading the ball around so much that was all part of the equation. But he looked fine to me.
Everybody feasted last night. Daniel, what do you got?
So I want to quickly talk about Tampa Bay on the other side, because I know we're going to talk about Antonio Brown here in a minute, but Mike Clay put out a tweet that I'd love to have us throw up on the screen, Lisa, if you have it for us.
This is so good.
So Mike Clay, or Mike Evans, last 3 receiving lines field. Can you see that a little bit easier?
Again, yes. His last 3 receiving lines against Marshawn Lattimore in coverage, including tonight, so last night's game. 2 targets, 0 catches. 2 targets, 0 catches. 2 targets, 0 catches. That's a bagel. That's a donut. Marshawn Lattimore, by the way, took to Twitter. He quote tweeted it, which was great. And he wished Mike Evans, not Mike Clay, better luck next year. This is some of that Saints social media that I was talking about. This is the players, but the whole, everybody was going crazy. Jameis was eating W's. It was awesome. Mike Evans. But you know what?
Listen, when you walk the walk, you get to talk the talk. It is what it is. The one thing I will say is, just to defend Mike Evans a little bit, the first game against Marshawn Lattimore this year, he was banged up that entire week. Remember, he was a game-time decision. We didn't think he was actually going to play. He had the hamstring injury. He was a surprise active.
But
I'm just going to –
I know.
But no, listen, Marshawn Lattimore's a really great player. He's a great player, and he's always had –
He's been inconsistent this year. It seems like he's one of those players that, when a championship
raises to the competition, yeah.
All right, so Antonio Brown, Daniel said we wanted to get there on him, and we will. But I think it actually it does sort of spawn another question, in my opinion.
Well, should we get to the Saints first? Should we talk about just how brilliant Drew Brees was in spreading the ball? And is there any
phenomenal? I mean, honestly, no.
I mean, they just had their way with him. I don't think there's any fantasy value beyond
it's the same guys.
I know Traquan Smith, whatever. It's Michael Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders in a slightly deeper league. Alvin Kamara, Latavius Murray's your your insurance.
Right. By the way, Alvin Kamara, bad last night, and he had 15.9 fantasy
I know.
points.
He just fell into 15 fantasy points. Didn't get used that much.
With my whole heart. Antonio Brown had 3 catches for 6.1 fantasy points, so 31 receiving yards last night. He played 39 snaps. He was on the field early. It was not like last year where in the opening drive, Tom Brady clearly was locked in on Antonio Brown. There was it was a little bit of a slower pace to start here for Antonio Brown, but it's one more mouth to feed. and he finishes with 3 for 31 on a bad night. I mean, obviously, Tom Brady was brutal. 209 passing yards, 3 interceptions last night. Just terrible last night. Chris Godwin, 3 for 41. Mike Evans, 4 for 64. We're halfway through the season right now, Matthew.
Right.
The Bucs have clearly and unquestionably upgraded their quarterback. Tom Brady is the GOAT. He will until someone gets at least 6. Tom Brady's my GOAT, and I will not be. Don't
You'll
bother
not be dissuaded from that. I'm with you. I'm with
He's my
you.
GOAT. From a fantasy football impact, Jameis Winston was way more fun for the rest of the Bucs offense. I mean, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like last year.
Yeah. I
Like
mean,
it was way
Jameis
more fun to
it
use
was
Chris
YOLO.
Godwin and Mike Evans last year. Like really, all Bucs players. Is that weird? Is that bad?
Not bad. I mean, they by the way,
take,
they
I
didn't
should
have
say?
nearly as they had a much more narrow sort of target tree, right? I mean, like, Jameis was sort of locked in on 2 guys. Like, they didn't really have Scotty Miller last year. O.J. Howard was inconsistent. They didn't have Gronk last year.
I don't know.
They were throwing. Probably not throwing a lot more, but they were more
down more.
They were
and
down
having to
more,
throw.
so they were like,
Yeah.
they probably, without looking at the pace of play stats, my guess is their pace of play was probably quicker last year.
Probably,
They
yeah.
didn't have a run game last year. They do this year. Like, there's a lot of differences. Yes.
It was more fun with those wide receivers.
Yeah.
Real quick, like I've always felt like Tom Brady has had a guy, right? There's always been the guy. It's Julian Edelman, it's Gronk, it's somebody. Who's his guy here in Tampa after 9 games into the season? I don't feel like there's been one that's clearly established as the de facto number 1 or his safety valve or any of those.
Well, he hasn't had, I mean, every week it's a different group. Like, oh, do I have Chris Godwin this week? Great. Oh, wait, I don't have Mike Evans this week? Oh, wait, like.
But those
it's
are still
been,
superstars.
I know, but I'm just saying, like, he hasn't had the same group of guys, the same main guys
Yep.
week in, week
That's true.
out. I was encouraged by Antonio Brown last night.
Yeah, I
you may
thought it was-
think I'm crazy,
No,
but
I don't know. I thought it was fine.
but I mean, like, in a game in which everything that could have gone wrong for the Buccaneers did, and he looked awful, and the protection broke down. In Antonio Brown's first game, he got 5 targets. Evans and Godwin got 6. Like, he was used almost as much as those 3 guys. They took a deep shot to him, and if he comes down with that ball, Brady underthrew it a little bit, felt like, but if he hits Brown in style, in stride, number 1, I think that game goes differently. But number 2 is, like, Antonio Brown's off to the races, or if nothing else, has like a 60-yard reception. And I think we're talking about him a lot differently this morning.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, I didn't. I wasn't discouraged.
Yeah.
by it. My observation was more specific to Godwin and Evans. Like,
Yeah,
it was more fun.
100%. Look,
they were-
coming into this game, before Antonio Brown got there, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin were barely top 30 fantasy wide receivers. And these are 2 guys that went in among the top 7
Right.
of wide receivers.
Yeah.
And the weird part is it's not that they're suddenly untalented, because they're not.
No, of course not.
And it's not like they've gotten bad quarterback play, because prior
much
to last
better.
night, Tom Brady's been amazing this
He's
year.
been amazing. Yeah. Anyways, we
So
digress.
it's just, yeah. Anyway.
Hey, on Saturday we had
Welcome
some
to fantasy
news
football.
that Des Bryant had been elevated to to their active roster from the practice squad just for a game.
I tweeted this last night. I'm gonna real quick. I just want to say this real quick. This was shocking to me.
How long is
This
real quick?
This is probably, I don't know, 10 minutes. Give me just 10 minutes.
Okay, all right.
All right, give me like just 10, maybe 15 minutes.
Okay.
But coming into that game,
Right.
Tom Brady, last 6 games, 17 touchdowns, just 1 interception. He was averaging
Okay.
over 23 fantasy points per game.
Okay.
Going into that game, the Saints had allowed touchdown passes at the highest rate in the NFL. They'd given up multiple touchdown passes in every single game this year.
Okay.
And 6 of the 7 quarterbacks to face the Saints this year had at least 19 fantasy points. The only one that didn't was Nick Foles. And now Tom Brady.